All right, here we are on Monday and the beginning of a new week. Thanks for being part of our journey on these 9 to 9s, 9 at 9s. We're glad that you're here. We're going to pick up on some of the things that we talked about yesterday. And one of the things that I made a big deal about is in the previous section, the beginning part of chapter 3, Paul says, listen, in the last days, you're going to have hard times. They're going to come, and people are going to be lovers of self, lovers of money, on. And he gives this whole list of rebellious attitudes that people will have. Then, turning back to Timothy in verse 10, he says this, but, I don't know about you, but I can never tell my parents that, hey, everybody else is doing it. My mother never bought that. My daddy never bought that. They would just simply look at me and say, I'm not raising everybody else. This is the way you will act. This is what Paul is saying to Timothy. I don't care how everybody else is acting in these last times. As much as things go wrong, as bad as things are, then people panic and they begin to control what's going on and they begin to snatch what they believe belongs to them, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. The temptation is to act like other people. The temptation is to fight fire with fire. That because these people are acting mean and hateful, then I will act mean and hateful back, although I'm acting in a mean and hateful way for a righteous cause, right? No. Jesus never gives us permission to be disobedient. But the word but in the English language disregards, it erases everything in front of it. So what Paul did here with Timothy is he erased everything else in front of it. But for you, here's how you are to live. You remember how I lived and what I went through. You remember how your mom and your grandmom lived, and you remember the scriptures. But for you, you live this way. So, what's going on in your life? Now, I know you're like me, you're paying attention to the news and you're looking at all of the craziness around us, and it's enough to make you crazy yourself. But you and I are not to live this way. We are to live in the hope and the power of the resurrection, regardless of the circumstances around us. So, what is it that Christ would expect of you in the circumstances you're now in? What are those challenges you're facing that have an opportunity to do less than what Christ would want you to do? Have you got that in mind? Why don't you write that down? Here is the challenge I have, and here is the temptation I have to be less. But here is what I know Christ would want me to do. Write it down. Here's what I know that I have the temptation to do less. Here's where I know I can mess up. And here's what I know Christ expects of me, based on the witnesses of the believers I have around me in my life, and based on the clear teaching of Scripture. Here's a challenge I have. Here's the opportunity I have to mess up. And here is what I know Christ expects of me. Can you write that down, and then can you do it even when nobody else around you is doing it? Why? Because you are a child of the risen Christ. Doesn't matter how everybody else acts. What matters in this moment is the obedience that you and I are called to. I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to think about it, and I'll see you tomorrow.